COVID-19 continues to be the focus of our Insider Public Affairs program as our region shifts into the reopening phase. Hello and welcome to the Insider. I'm Lisa Adams. Welcome to our viewers and to you, our listeners on the radio as well. We're continuing today with our COVID-19 focused editions of our program. And today it's all about the Erie Philharmonic. We'll look at how a large events organization has navigated this challenging time at the end of one performance season and hear what they're thinking as we move toward the 2021 season. My guest is Steve Weiser, Executive Director of the Erie Philharmonic. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Lisa.
And later in the program, we will be joined by Music Director Daniel Meyer. So in full disclosure, I am a board member of this organization, but I have my host hat on today. So my first question is, how are you doing, Steve? Your administrative staff has been working remotely. Are you staying that way even here in the yellow phase?
We definitely are. We had to adapt very quickly, and we've definitely enjoyed our time being at home with our cats and our pets and our significant others. So it's sort of it turned our world upside down a little bit, but we're definitely going to be staying home for the foreseeable future. We've managed to sort of create the perfect remote box office from all of our different locations. If you call the box office number, it will sort of route to all of our different cell phones. So we've managed to adapt and get even more tech savvy than we already were, but for now, we're definitely staying home.
So let's look back to March. The season was going along very well. We have a little bit of some pictures from the March 7th concert featuring a world premiere with a female trumpet soloist. You were looking to the finale of the Pops and the Symphonic season in the Warner before the theater was going to close for that long-awaited expansion and renovation. So how did you respond when it first hit? You were thinking you could maybe postpone concerts and then realizing that you had to go farther.
Right, so we sort of all came out of the March 7th concert on such a high. We had just had the world premiere. We had a huge audience. Composer Vivian Fung was in town. It was really a special time. But we sort of knew that there was something looming on the future, and we were going to have to make a decision pretty quickly. So within a couple days after that concert, we decided to postpone the Rodgers and Hammerstein concert. And then very quickly after that, we decided to postpone the Beethoven 9 concert. So initially we thought that, okay, let's see how this passes. We'll weather the storm. We'll react now and sort of do the things we have to do. And then maybe by the middle of June, we'll be able to come back out and do these concerts again. But the thing that popped up the quickest, I think, for us is the moment you're sitting around a table and you make this decision with the executive committee and the music director, and then you have that realization that that March 7th concert that you just saw pictures from, that was it. That was the final concert in the Warner Theater before renovations. So it's a stark reality for us. That's when it really kind of settled in, that this is definitely going to be a different world, because we didn't expect it, and without us knowing, those are the final bits of music ever played there before renovations.
Right. So first you canceled or postponed some concerts, as you said, moved them into June. Now you've actually had to cancel those. So those two concerts, including the Beethoven, which was a big conclusion of this 4x4 series that you've been doing.
Right.
So patrons first had to shift their tickets to June, and now those concerts are canceled. So I know patrons have been generous, actually donating back their end of season ticket dollars. How have you given them an incentive to do that?
So one of the most amazing things, and as always, the Erie community really steps up. We were able to secure an anonymous $100,000 matching gift towards all tickets that are donated back to the orchestra. And to say that that is sort of life-changing for us doesn't even scrape the surface of how important that is. That would literally turn into the operating money for us to keep our doors open. Without ticket sales and with canceled concerts, this is literally the thing that will keep us going, that'll let us be able to do music whenever we get to come back together. So everybody that donates their ticket back, it's instantly doubled by this anonymous donor.
And you had a special May concert that was added in to sort of move patrons over to the temporary home in Erie Insurance Arena, but that's now postponed. That one isn't canceled yet?
Right, so Music of the Nights, which would have been our first concert in the arena, has now been postponed to August 20th, which ironically, it will now still be, hopefully, the first concert in the arena. But that has been postponed to mid-August.
And you had to cancel a fundraising event, Mac and Cheese, which has become really popular over the years, moving to bigger and bigger and bigger venues.
Exactly. We're a little disappointed. I mean, we're really disappointed about that. We had the Groove lined up to play. We had an incredible new lineup that really would have, we think we had solved the line problem and the issues of sort of we've had the past couple of years as the event has grown really quickly. We really had all of these great ideas to implement and the best laid plans, as we know. So next year when we come back to that event, boy, is it going to be well planned.
And we'll all be hungry for mac and cheese. All right. Well,
Exactly.
when we come back, will there be an in-person season with these restrictions on large gatherings? And what are the options on the table? And how will the Philharmonic organization make decisions? All of that with Executive Director Steve Weiser when we come back. I'm Lisa Adams. Welcome back to The Insider on TV and on the radio. We are talking about the future performance plans for the Erie Philharmonic, a community asset that draws the large crowds we're not permitted to have just yet. My guest is Erie Philharmonic Executive Director Steve Weiser. Daniel Meyer will be joining us a little bit later. So you announced the upcoming season in the arena because of the Warner renovations before the pandemic hit, and people started ordering subscriptions, and they're continuing to do so?
Definitely. It's each day we sort of have a constant communication with our staff, and that number goes up each day of people that are still buying their season passes for next year. So it's definitely still out there, and it's definitely still growing, which kind of forces us to really start to think about the myriad of plans we're going to have in place.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's part of the psyche of people wanting things to get back to normal, or just wanting to continue to support you if they have all along. So we have some of the images and a little bit of the sounds of that season that was planned. We can take a look at this as we're talking here. So this is a big scale season that was going to be over in the arena to kind of fit that space. Acrobats and so on. So what are you thinking? What options are you considering to make music and yet keep the musicians and the audience safe? Will there be an in-person season if large gatherings are still prohibited?
So the irony is not lost on us that we go out of our way to make literally the biggest season possible leading into a pandemic. So it's just, when you can take a step back and laugh at least it lets you smile a little bit. So while we don't exactly know what the landscape looks like yet, we are 100% committed to doing a full season. So right now we're sort of working on 3 or 4 different ways to approach it, and a lot of it will be determined on how many people can gather in large groups and how many people can we even gather in small groups to determine, are we able to do a full-scale concert? Do we have to stream a concert, but we can have all 70 musicians on stage? Or do we have to stream a concert, but maybe we change the music to be a little smaller? We're sort of looking at all of those different avenues. Ironically, again, thankful that we are in the arena, because if we're allowed to get 60 musicians together, but we have to spread them out, we will have this space in the arena to spread them out and then live stream a concert. So those are sort of all the different fun options that are on the table.
So could that mean maybe streamed concerts for the early part of the season? And as you said, depending on even how many musicians can be together and how they might have to be spread apart, and then maybe in-person concerts after the first of the year or when we get that vaccine?
It definitely is one of our avenues that we're looking at, that maybe we would stream, for at least simplicity purposes, maybe we would stream the first 4 concerts, and then once we hit January, maybe we're able to do those concerts live with an audience. And the other thing we're trying to take into recommendation is, in a venue as big as the arena that can sit up to 3,300 people, are we better served streaming to the full audience or trying to bring in a smaller, limited audience in person? So those are all kind of the things that we're weighing. We're still leaning towards streaming being the safest way to keep our patrons and musicians as safe and healthy as possible. And then maybe once we hit January and February, then we're able to do those big, large-scale concerts again.
Of course, if you can't do concerts, you're not raising the self-sustaining money that you need as not only a nonprofit, but an organization that's part of our community for over 100 years here. So did the orchestra secure some of those PPP loans, and how is that protecting your staff, our maestro, and the musicians until we know when live performances can be back?
So we were fortunate enough to receive PPP loan funding, which will help keep the staff and the music director. Obviously, the key thing of what we have is the staff and music director Daniel Meyer. It allow us to keep the staff on call as we need to keep adapting to all of these changing things, which is huge. And then we also received funding to be able to pay the musicians. So we were able to pay the musicians for one of the canceled performances, and we will now have funding to be able to at least get through the beginning part of the season, which can be good when there's still a lot of fluidity on the table. Having some cash will at least ensure we can get the season started and then push forward from there. But those loan fundings will definitely be invaluable for us.
Well, you certainly have been visible even during this time with some special things that your musicians have been doing to keep music in our lives in some way, and they're all pretty creative. So when we come back, music director Daniel Meyer is going to join us to share what he and the musicians have been up to during this time and how other orchestras across the country are responding to the COVID-19 crisis. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Lisa.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Insider. I'm Lisa Adams, joined by Daniel Meyer, music director of the Erie Philharmonic. We've been talking about how the Philharmonic is navigating this unprecedented time and how it's impacting musicians and how they're creative anyway, and then what the future holds for live orchestra music. So Daniel Meyer is here with us now. First of all, how are you and your family doing? I know that you and your wife, Mary, both work in this orchestral music space.
Thank you, Lisa. I think we're both doing about as well as can be expected. I mean, of course, we're safe physically. We haven't had any bouts with the illness, but unfortunately, of course, just like everybody, we're all wondering what's happening next. And I think there's a degree of uncertainty and anxiety that goes along with not knowing what your plans are. And of course, that's a lot of our lives, both between my wife and my son and myself, are very meticulously planned because of all the activity that we have to do and all the concerts that we're mounting. So it's that uncertainty and that anxiety that I think just makes people feel a little bit uneasy.
But you have to not have too much anxiety when you have children at home, and I know you've become your son Leo's teacher.
That's right. I mean, it's really fun because essentially he gets a little lesson that's online every day. So he gets live contact with his teachers and with his classmates via a Zoom meeting. And then as soon as that Zoom meeting's turned off, it's up to us, the parents, to teach. So I've been teaching a lot of consonant blends and silent E's, and we've been working with 5 squares and 10 squares. It's Singapore math, which I knew nothing about, but I'm learning it all just as much as my son is.
Yeah, I think we have a little bit of video of Leo's desk here. So parents all over are doing this, but I'm assuming because you have been sort of music educators in your lives as well, that you maybe made the transition better than some parents have.
Well, it's fun because we were just approaching a problem at the piano last night and thinking, oh, well, I can come up with an analogous issue that we were talking about in his grammar and in his writing lessons. So it's fun to think about the intersections between phonetics and phonics and sentence structure and word structure and ways that might also have some bearing on his music lessons.
So tell us why music is important in times of crisis like this, and about the creative videos that Erie Philharmonic musicians and some of our very famous guest artists have been sharing in From Home series that anybody can check out at eriephil.org. We have a little bit of video while you tell us about the variety of things that they've been doing.
Well, I mean, I think music is just as important during a pandemic as it is during normal times, which is to say, music feeds our souls, it feeds our minds, it feeds our imagination. The great thing about music is that it can transport you, or it can engage you, or it can make it easier for you to sleep, or it can rile you up. I mean, we all have different playlists and different soundtracks for the different elements of our lives, whether it's working out in the gym or just trying to zone out and really relax and shut the rest of the world off. So music's important to all of us in one way or another. And of course, as performing musicians, making music is our lifeblood. We love what we do. We prepare so carefully for our moment on the stage. And so, as you can imagine, about 90% of what we do is related to preparing for that moment on stage, so that when we don't have that moment, it's very difficult for us. So we've been doing our best to try to find ways to communicate with our audiences through videos, through private recitals. We just did a wonderful podcast, and we did a live masterclass with one of the singers that we unfortunately didn't get a chance to work with last month. So a lot of different ways that people can connect to classical music virtually right now. And frankly, a lot of musicians are kind of making it up as we go. They're really finding creative ways to present what they would have worked on anyways, whether it's their solo repertoire or whether it's music to teach children, or it's ways to interact with audiences, or even in some cases creating a virtual orchestra where different members of an orchestra are all recording their own part, and then through technical wizardry it's all put together into one virtual orchestra. That's something I did with my students at Duquesne University.
I watched that vocal master class this week, and it was really terrific. I couldn't turn it off, so enjoyed that a lot. And some of the musician videos aren't even really playing their instruments. We've learned some things about the musicians that we didn't know. One woman makes her own reeds, and that was a fascinating lesson. Well, let's move on. You've been on WQLN Classics with Brian Hanna now every Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning, actually able to play excerpts of recordings from the Erie Philharmonic's own season, and that's been really interesting too, and to hear the quality of the orchestra over the radio like that.
This has been enormously gratifying for me because I often don't take the time or have the time to produce a full-length radio broadcast of music that we've already performed at the Warner Theater. So it's a chance for me to audit what we've done, to take stake of where we are, to listen to the way that I interpreted a particular piece, and I get a chance to be a little bit removed from the heat or the passion of the actual music making, because sometimes we think that we're communicating in a way that may or may not come across to the audience. So a chance to hear a recording and understand how that music was made is really valuable for me. So I'm essentially arming myself with a lot of information that I can go back to the ensemble when we finally do get a chance to meet together and rehearse again. It's almost like a coach watching film on Monday morning. You really want to study all the individual components and notice things that perhaps you didn't completely understand or notice in the heat of the performance. So it's been a real learning opportunity for me, but also a really wonderful and gratifying one.
You've also been creating and narrating preview videos of the season that we hope to have, and also putting out some personal playlists that are very lovely, that I've listened to a couple of those. But we do have one of these videos where you narrate. I think you could be working here for us at the TV station. These are great.
Thank you. I mean, this is really an opportunity to dig a little bit more deeply into the music, to think about what the composer was thinking and what he or she was feeling at the time that they wrote their art, and really explore everything that supports the great music that we listen to. Whether it's a revolutionary era that Beethoven went through, or a Second World War that Shostakovich had to deal with, and Stalinism, or whether it's just a beautiful scene or a beautiful pond or a lake that inspired a composer to write a beautiful piece of music. There's always a backstory to the great art that we love and that we listen to. And I like to kind of dig into those backstories and maybe give people a little chance to understand some of the inspiration and the impetus for the creation of this great music.
Well, when we come back, Daniel, we're going to talk about how other orchestras are planning for the future. Will they be streaming concerts or be in person, and what role you're playing in those discussions for us here in Erie. Stay with us. I'm Lisa Adams. Welcome back to the Insider. We've been talking about where the Erie Philharmonic Orchestra goes now under this pandemic situation. We talked with Steve Weiser, now with Daniel Meyer, music director of the Erie Phil. So talk about what's going on industry-wide. What are you hearing on the range of ideas and solutions for other orchestras?
Well, the first thing that we're all talking about is how do we gather safely? Not only the musicians on stage and what distance do we have to be in order to make sure that everyone stays safe, but also how do we accommodate a concert hall filled with people? How does that work? So orchestras all over the world are thinking and studying about ways that we can make live music again, but do it in a very safe way. If you check out the Berlin Philharmonic's website, they actually mounted a concert just a couple weeks ago practicing social distancing and trying to figure out if they actually can have viable live performances in that setup. And I think the answer is yes. And now we just have to start getting creative about how we're going to perhaps reprogram some of our seasons, or think about interesting venues where we can play, or whether we can have an audience in the venue at all in the coming months, or whether we should be creating content that will be purely digital. In other words, we'll perhaps record pieces that we play and then broadcast them live on the web or on television. So I know that we at the Philharmonic are talking about that, and of course a lot of other orchestras are investigating how they can digitize what they do and make the live experience a little bit more accessible to people that may not be able to come into the concert hall just yet.
So we have some video of our beautiful home, the Warner Theater, and interestingly, we were going to be not in this home already this season with an interesting but challenging situation moving over to the arena. We know the work will go forward on the Warner, that's a bright spot, but what are your best thoughts for how Erie Philharmonic should return, given the fact that it's been a quite flat curve here to date?
We all want to get back to making music, believe me. I've been in touch with our musicians and our board and our staff, and we're just so anxious to as I said earlier, we spend 90% of our time preparing for the big moment. And then to not have the big moments, which is our live concerts, is difficult, really difficult for us. We want to make sure that we're getting that payoff opportunity, that opportunity to actually get in front of a live audience and share what it is that we love and what we've spent so much of our lifetime mastering. So it's really important for us to get back on the stage, but we're going to do it in a safe way, and we're going to find a way to make sure that audiences can still hear what we do. And as the coach of a wonderful team, I want to get those players all assembled. I want us to continue to practice. I want us to continue to perform. That's the only way we're going to get better is by having those opportunities to perform and practice together. So we're certainly finding every way that we can to make sure that we get back, but do it in a safe way.
So the music will be back in some form. We're down to about the last minute here. What can patrons and supporters do to help while we wait for definitive word on what's next?
Well, just remember to support your performing arts organizations, in particular the Erie Philharmonic, because as you can imagine, it takes a lot of resources to make things happen and to continue to plan and to continue to support the wonderful staff that supports our orchestra. So remember your arts organizations, please, at this time, and understand that although we may not be on the stage, we certainly are still incurring expenses, and that we certainly still need your support, and we need your love, and we're doing our best to stay in contact with you and provide you with some great music.
So again, people can go to eriephil.org and they can click on those at home or from home videos that the musicians are continuing to produce. They can also donate their tickets back to the organization for concerts that had to be canceled, and we will sit tight and stay tuned for what the decisions will be going forward. Daniel, thanks for being with us.
No, it was a pleasure, Lisa. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. As always, if you have an idea for us to explore on The Insider, just email me at ladams@wicu12.com and join us again next time for The Insider.